Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. I'm Tom Hannafin. He's Justin King. This week, we're getting set for Penn State versus FIU this Saturday at noon Eastern on the Big Ten Network. Penn State 1-0 after defeating Nevada last week by a score of 46-11, facing off against Florida International, who defeated Bethune-Cookman this past week. This is continuing in this trio of non-conference games for the Penn State Nittany Lions that, again, no disrespect to these opponents, but these are extremely winnable games for Penn State football, and it's a matter of fine-tuning a lot of things before the meat of the season. The Big Ten schedule gets underway on September 27th, Penn State hosting Oregon after a bye week. So this is still very much a period where Penn State has a chance to tinker, take a look at its depth, get healthy at certain positions, and take an extended look at players maybe for the future. But before we get into FIU, Justin, what are some final thoughts you had from the Nevada game last week?
I think you build on it. I think you should feel really good about getting the execution all around as a team, and it's something to build on from a confidence standpoint. Understand that you're able to execute at high levels, whether it's below competition, equal competition, or competition that you deem better than you, which I hope they don't. Always come out and take advantage of the win, but stack those up, manufacture the wins moving forward so they understand the gaps that still need to be filled if they're chasing a championship. So I think when you're championships on the expectation board for the season, you don't really rest on your laurels after you beat Nevada.
A couple of things that, we did our recap episode. You can watch or listen to that now wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc. And also, if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. If you don't want to deal with ads, you can watch all of our episodes and upcoming episodes ad-free for just 99 cents a month. You can follow the link in the description of this podcast to get ad-free episodes of State of State. We left out in that a couple of little things here and there. Ethan Grunkemeyer at backup quarterback. We touched on it briefly, Justin, but I was encouraged by what we saw. And even James Franklin earlier on this week, when asked about Grunk, said he was very impressed by him and said that he played better than he practiced. And one of the things that he was pointing towards, James Franklin being he, saying that Grunkemeyer, in practice with the quarterbacks, you pretty much bubble wrap them and no defensive players can even get remotely near them. And it's only once they start experiencing the live rounds in gameplay that you get a real understanding. But he liked the way that Grunkemeyer was decisive, thought the passing game in general was a positive emphasis, and just really liked what he saw when backup quarterback, the number 3 running back, and all these battles within the depth chart were playing out. But there were a lot of little positives like that. What did you see from Grunkemeyer?
When a coach says he played better in the game than we've seen in practice, you get those guys that you deal with, we call them gamers, right? Like, not to just make it oversimplified, but you got certain guys, when that red light comes on, they just perform different. Not to compare him to a Johnny Manziel, but there's a lot of guys in the past that just have an instinctual feel for playing football. Like, they're still playing backyard, concrete / grass type of football, and they keep that joy with them. And it sounds like Grunk, even from his teammates that I've spoken to in the past, they sense that in him. There's a joy in which he plays with. So sometimes you don't get to see that in practice, because practice, you're trying to execute plays. You're trying to hit the second read. You're trying to do exactly what the coach wants you to do to build up that trust. In the game, man, you got to let that thing go. And I think Gronk has a special ability to be able to do that. And you've seen it when quarterbacks scramble and the athleticism comes out and you start being playmakers. And you want to balance that out with making the right reads and operate in the offense and not being Superman by yourself. But that's what I would assume he's speaking to.
Speaking of athleticism, we plain forgot to talk about it on the recap show, so that's on me. But Cam Wallace doing his best Saquon Barkley impression with that leap and also sporting the number 26. So everybody went crazy about that. But no one on this podcast is going to directly compare anybody to Saquon Barkley. I think that's completely unfair. But it was really nice to see Cam Wallace get back out there. And James Franklin recounted a story calling from his basement in his boxers to congratulate Cam Wallace on the performance that he had. But I'm not sure what the injury is. Maybe it's been put out there in the past, Justin, but it was a long-term injury, enough that it sounded like Cam Wallace was really struggling mentally, emotionally, and physically, obviously trying to get back. So to see Cam perform the way he did, how did you feel? And then also that running back 3 battle still very much happening right now.
No, it is, and I mean it's going to happen these next couple of games before we get to the big ones. But I like the production that we've seen. I think I like the energy in which all the players played with. I think you can't get into the weeds of too much in evaluation because there weren't any big clusters or any bad things that happened. But a lot of guys their first time getting those quality reps and how they performed in those moments was encouraging. So especially with Cam Wallace too. And yeah, it's still not clear what's going to happen with that third spot at the running back, but
yeah,
time will tell.
I mean, you have Quentin Martin Jr., who's been a little bit banged up as of late, so did not get to see the field against Nevada. Corey Smith, Tyke Hayes, there's depth there. There's probably 4 or 5 different running backs that are really going to try and compete for that running back 3 job behind Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. But let's get into this week. So this week, according to our friends at FanDuel, Penn State is favored by 41.5 to defeat the Florida International Panthers. They have 5 returning starters from last year, plus 25 transfers, as James Franklin illuminated earlier on this week in his press conference. You know a thing or two about their head coach, Willie Simmons.
Yeah, former FAMU head coach, took a job at Duke. And I remember even when he took the job at Duke, it was when I was really heavy in the coaching search and piece of my business. But there was a big stir of like, oh, he took a head coaching job from FAMU to be an assistant coach at Duke. But a lot of people not recognizing the path that you need to go sometimes become a head coach. So he took that path and now I'm becoming the head coach at FIU. Another one of the few successful journeys from HBCU head coach to FCS Division I coach. So congrats to him, and we'll see what they got this week.
Simmons was at Duke briefly with Manny Diaz, who Penn State fans are very familiar with. Some players to look out for: running back Kajon Owens had himself an outstanding game, granted against Bethune-Cookman. I would say inferior competition based on what FIU is going to face this year within Conference USA. Speaking which, quarterback Keyshawn Jenkins was projected to be the Conference USA preseason Offensive Player of the Year. They got in a lot of bodies against Bethune-Cookman. 13 receivers caught passes, 7 total rushers. This was a very strong showing for Florida International, but there is going to be a significant talent gap when Penn State hosts FIU this coming weekend. And it's the interesting thing, Justin, about dealing with a program like FIU and what Penn State just got done dealing with in terms of Nevada is that this is a program that gets heavily picked over with the transfer portal every winter and every spring. So you see kind of two-way traffic going in and out of a program like this in a state like Florida where you have tremendous talent everywhere you look. So it's a great opportunity for players either on their way up or on their way down for whatever reason to get on the field, get some tape out there. So it does make it difficult. I'm not saying Penn State's going to be threatened to lose this game, but it does make it difficult for a coaching staff to really evaluate a team. Just to the points that James Franklin was talking about with Nevada is that they had 70 new players, I think he said, the Wolfpack. And FIU, it's not nearly to that extreme, but you're in a situation where you have one game of data to really break down. And then the rest of it, familiarity with a guy like Willie Simmons. So you almost in the evaluation process, just you have to almost go off of what you expect from coaches in terms of tendencies, because it's not like you have the full 11 and 11 that you can be like, oh man, they have this much time together and all these tendencies as players and as a team.
Yeah, sometimes that's freeing, right? You just work off of the frameworks that okay, first, second down, this is what he likes to do. Third down, this is a gist of what they like to do. And sometimes not having all the details and too much information allows you to set simple rules within your team for them to play freely and let their creativity shine through, and also gives the coordinators a little bit of room to hone in on what they're going to do from a creative standpoint, because they're not trying to stop or protect so much from having too much information from the other side. So I always liked playing teams without that much information for us, because it helps you play fast when you can just count on like, all right, we're going to base our things on these sets, on these frameworks, and on this look, we're going to do this. You just kind of play fast. So as long as they do that and not overthink their calls or how they're approaching it, I think they can learn a lot about themselves even moving forward.
What was the biggest thing you learned about Penn State in the week 1 victory against Nevada?
A lot of talent and depth on the team. From a physicality standpoint, up front, they were above the line. And again, the gap being filled from last year with the receivers, I thought that was something that was very encouraging and comforting to feel. We had 2 guys that have over 70 yards, and they were timely catches. Like, all right, we need this on second down, we need this on third down, and we're getting the down and distance plus, right? And having separation when they're getting those catches, and having a quarterback that can deliver those passes, and also not having our run game operate at its top efficiency, but still being able to move the line of scrimmage and create a level of toughness in the offense and the identity of the team. So everything from that standpoint, I really enjoyed. And you see us starting to make in DDS on the defensive side from another pass rusher, and we already know what those guys on the back end can do. They just didn't have a chance to really show it because the other team was playing from behind the whole time and couldn't really hold up front.
I want to start with the wide receivers because I think that's the biggest issue for every Penn State fan over the last few seasons. But Kyron Hudson and Treybor Pena looked very, very sharp in this game. James Franklin mentioned it earlier on this week that he was impressed with what they did. He wanted to see more of Devontae Ross. Just kind of didn't work out that way for Ross in this game, and he had some bumps and bruises over the offseason. So it's just a matter of, kind of getting him implemented. So potentially see more of a focus with him in this game. But Franklin was saying, we wanted to see what those guys were all about. And there's part of me that sits there and is like, hey, was this some messaging to the universe of like, hey, these wide receivers we got, they're for real because you're going to them. I think it was 6 catches for Hudson, 7 for Pena. So it was like they were clearly the focal point of the passing game. And at the same time, Franklin said he'd like to see more explosives. And that while they won the explosive play battle, he was like, I'd like to see more chunk plays. I'd like to see more explosives. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm a chunk play guy. So sometimes I'm
what am I saying? Of course,
take 5-step drop and chunk it deep. That's I'm that type of guy. No, but I do understand the chunk plays, and I think that's growth even for James to say that he wants more chunk plays because as an offensive coordinator or a head coach, sometimes they fall into the disciplinary talk of keeping things 50-50, this, that, and the third, and not really being aggressive in their speech or their talk or media talk of saying, hey, we want big explosive plays, because that does change the mentality of an offensive coordinator and how the offense kind of operates. So, I mean, given that that's probably a green light that you're going to see some double moves and some big plays next week.
The over-under, according to FanDuel, is 54.5. So we were talking about it last week. If you'd placed a bet in regard to that over-under early on in the week, you might have been really ticked off by the end of the game because I believe earlier on in the week we talked about that it was 57.5, and that moved a little bit, and then the final total score was exactly 57 points. So some people might be ripping their hair out, that sort of situation. I kind of expect to see more scoring in this game because I do think Nevada is a better opponent than FIU is going to present. And also, I think it's natural to see the team ramp things up in terms of the intensity and the urgency as these non-conference games go on. And I'll defer to you, is that first game, it felt like Penn State was like, we don't have to put anything crazy on film. They know what they have in the running game. So to the points that you were saying, like, hey, the running game didn't do anything earth-shattering. You didn't really need them to, and you just needed everybody to stay healthy, like you talk about. You needed to see something out of the passing game. You needed to see elements of the defense play to a certain level. And as week 2 and then eventually week 3 against Villanova, it's that Villanova game where I expect there to be some bite, I guess, because it didn't necessarily feel like this was a team in week 1 against Nevada that was trying to beat Nevada into the ground. You might see something like that against Villanova, and I think you might see some of that intensity ratchet up against FIU. What do you think?
I think you're definitely going to see that intensity ramp up against FIU just from recruiting the state of Florida and the guys that they get. They're going to have a chip on their shoulder, right? Like they're the guys that didn't get a chance to go to Florida State, Miami, or Florida, and they like to prove themselves. Anybody that knows you play with guys from Florida, I mean, at every level, I mean, they don't lack any confidence. So be ready for some guys that are coming up, ready to make a play and believe in their speed and try to make plays from that standpoint. The thing that we have them is, I think, obviously will be up front. So we'll just make it a physical game, punch them in the mouth, and see if they quit before halftime.
Earlier this week, James Franklin talked about Drew Allar, said, quote, Drew played how I would expect him to play. He made some outbreaking throws that only a handful of college or NFL quarterbacks can make. He made plays with his feet, extended plays with his legs, took a few too many shots, but he played very clean, missed the first touchdown throw to Hudson, but I was very pleased with the passing game overall. Hudson and Pena played well. The tight end committee did some good things, got the running backs involved in the passing game. 22 of 26. Really nice day for Drew Allar. Again, like I didn't go into that game needing to see Drew Allar look like Superman. I just needed him to, one, stay healthy, and two, execute the offense. And that's exactly what he did.
I mean, that's exactly what you want the quarterback to do. I mean, sometimes we get messed up on the game manager and game changer conversation, but regardless if you have the tools to be able to make those throws that James referring to, those outbreaking throws that only a few can make, that keeps defenses in a very tight or peculiar type of situation when they have to dial up something to go against you. Having the mobility to get off the spot. I feel like his pocket presence, even this past weekend, was a little bit better. He never seemed rattled and keeping his eyes down the field. And like you said, not looking for the chunk plays, but look, the guy's open here 15 yards, put it on him. Up here's a timing route, put it on him. And again, those guys were making those plays, and I think the ceiling, I don't think there is a ceiling for this season. It's just a matter of how he continues to approach it mentally and have a little bit of that gamer in himself as he moves forward.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. State of State at Penn State Football Show is presented by Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable.
What do data brokers do? Your name, contact info, social security number, home address, even information about your family members could all be compiled by data brokers and sold online. The New York Times Wirecutter has named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services.
Justin and I both have an active online presence, so privacy for both of us is really important, whether it's professional or personal. Have you ever been a victim of identity theft, harassment, doxing? If you haven't, you probably know someone who has, and Delete Me can help. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting PRO to 64,000. The only way to get 20% off is to text PRO to 64,000. That's PRO to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. Delete Me. Your personal data is yours again. I want to emphasize this to fans that are watching these games and expecting Penn State to thump the likes of Nevada and FIU and Villanova. On the scoreboard, 46-11 looks great. When you watch the game, are you sitting there thinking, my God, these are world beaters? Like, no, to me, Penn State looked exactly like they needed to look. You don't need to come out in week one and beat Nevada into submission in the first two quarters. You don't. You have other things you're trying to figure out. You're trying to figure out your depth. You're trying to put different things on tape. You're trying to see how guys react to things that you try to install in camp. All the things that Jim Knowles has been trying to install very, very quickly. You're far more concerned about that because you know there's a talent gap. You expect to win. You coach to win, and you coach hard. Obviously, James Franklin was literally doing that until the final whistle. But again, I expect that intensity to go up this week. You mentioned something interesting, and we had pointed out after the game against Nevada is that there seemed to be a higher tempo, and to the points about Drew Allar is that he took what the defense gave him. And I was fine with that because it forced Nevada to cover everything, whether it was the run, the pass, every blade of grass they had to cover, and that just made life very difficult for them. James Franklin said earlier on this week that the reason they went to that was because Nevada was trying to shorten the game with the way that they were calling plays on offense. So, quote, I wanted to make sure we had enough time to get our reps, so we went tempo. It was a chance to get reps and work on tempo. So you might not necessarily see that tempo offense consistent through the entirety of the season. You'll likely see it again. Of course, it's the select moments where it's appropriate in that middle eight that James Franklin likes to talk about, the last 4 minutes of the second quarter, first 4 minutes of the third quarter. Every coach focuses very heavily on that. You can flip a game in a lot of ways in big time competition. So I thought it was very interesting that he was like, yeah, we did that out of necessity. And then also, again, not to say that this is a glorified scrimmage, but if you're changing the pace of the game to get more reps for your guys, that's not a team that's worried about the score or worried about losing. That's okay. How many times can we get Chaz Coleman snaps on the defensive side of the ball? How many times can we see the aforementioned Cam Wallace at running back? That's the thought process there. I found it interesting. What did you think?
James has always been upfront about being a developmental program and a developmental coach. And like, if he wasn't, he would be in the NFL. And I think a lot of times fans get lost in that when we look at the amateurism or now the professional college sports landscape, because I think there's two different ways of approach coaching. Yes, we get judged and valued based on our wins and losses, but there's a way of coaching to win and there's a way of coaching to develop. And that's always tricky, especially when you talk about high school, when you have a lot of these high school coaches that win a lot of championships, but they don't develop any players to move on to the next level. In college, it's even more. And then you have some high school coaches that develop players that go on to the next level, but never win any championships. In college, it's really interesting because you want those two things to really match up and mirror. Like, I want guys that develop from point A to Z, and also we have to win. And I think James and his staff do a great job with the developmental opportunities and winning at the same time. And I think that's a lot of the discrepancy when we look at certain programs and how they operate, because if it's just a win now type of situation, you don't get to offer all the developmental opportunities and getting guys ready. Although this is a great piece and best practices for building a team in depth moving forward. But I think that comes from his pure philosophy of being a developmental coach. And when you see that, you see guys that, came in 33rd ranked defensive end, like Abdul Carter, going top 5, right? Not everybody or a Tyler Warren that was a late recruit that's
quarterback,
top 10 pick. Yeah, man, quarterback, top 10 pick. Like, you see that across the board. Saquon being a guy from Rutgers that we stole, and now being the best player in NFL. So like, his whole philosophy of his career has been that developmental coach. So when you see the practices and operation on how he builds the depth on his team, that's something that can't be just blanked at or not taking real credence of how hard and strategic that is to do to build a winning program.
That is a big reason why, according to our friends at FanDuel, there are 3 teams right now tied for the lead with the best odds to win the national championship: Ohio State, Georgia, and Penn State, all at plus 600 right now, according to FanDuel. After that, it's Texas plus 700 and LSU plus 1,100, Oregon plus 1,300. So Penn State, while they did play inferior competition, keeping pace in terms of the national perspective of what they can be. You talked about the developmental piece. In these non-conference games, yes, you're developing, but then the thing you hit when we were going into Nevada, what's the biggest takeaway you want to have? You're like, well, stay healthy. Penn State came out healthy, and they also did a very good job protecting players that were teetering. And we talked about a guy like Quentin Martin Jr. Zariah Fisher is a guy that did not play against Nevada, but did come to Beaver Stadium and wanted to play, was excited to play. And according to James Franklin, it sounded like the appropriate and safe thing to do to just hold him out, as dealt with some bumps and bruises during camp. Again, the luxury of these 3 non-conference games is that you have FIU, you have Villanova, you have a couple more games if you want to get him out there and see what he can do, and then a bye week, and then Oregon. You're really circling Oregon, hoping. It's like, I want him to be 100% for that. And boy, what a nice thing to keep off of tape if Zariah Fisher is this breakout star that the program is heralding him as. Boy, if you don't put him on tape and then Oregon's got to deal with him in a whiteout and he is everything they say he is, that's great. I am going to continue to hold out judgment on Zariah Fisher until we see a reasonable batch of data on him to understand what he is. But I was at least encouraged to hear, hey, they're protecting him. And then you get instances, Justin, where you saw a lot of guys along the defensive line get involved. The aforementioned Chaz Coleman, Kamaju, Anai White, Wayful, Blanding, Gilliam, forward. Obviously, Durant denied and Sutton just ate people's lunch. The defensive line got so many reps. Did it give you newfound confidence in that position? Because I think the depth at DN and D tackle, maybe outside of the depth at linebacker, were two of the bigger questions on the defense.
It was always wait and see, but I think we've always echoed the confidence in Coach Barnes getting those guys ready to compete and play just from historical evidence and guys that he has done that with. And I think, I mean, they are who we thought they were. Like they're a pretty good, talented team, and it's still yet to be told like how they perform against top tier Big Ten competition. But they had the depth and the ability to do the things that we need to do to go deep into the season. So like that's the question mark. So like there's no deficiencies there, but let's see how they perform when there's a little checkmates here and there throughout the game.
You would notice it far faster than the untrained eye. Jim Knowles installing his defense. The depth at linebacker is a piece that we've talked about a lot. Amari Campbell and Dom DeLuca, the green dot in the back of their helmet, the direct coach to player communication. Tony Rojas getting back out there in live game play after being banged up for a lot of last season, dealing with an off-season surgery. And then Lockdown U looking sharp during this game. What did you see from the linebackers and the defensive backs, especially thinking about Knowles installing this defense?
It didn't seem like they were asked to do too much. You know what I mean? They were just kind of playing their keys and like flying to the football. It seemed like they were tasked with playing fast. That's what it seemed like. It didn't seem like there was any super exotic blitzes or shows or like prowler type of defenses where guys were moving around. It just seemed like they were lining up, making sure everybody knew what they were doing, getting the right checks, and then from there, make the play. Like let's play fast, tackle, and be violent. And create turnovers, because it seemed like DDS, that ball hunting seemed like something that was emphasized throughout camp, just from everybody ripping at the football and kind of going from that standpoint. So kudos.
Create turnovers. Love it.
There we go.
A couple other players that James Franklin believed flashed. We mentioned Grunkemeyer. We mentioned Cam Wallace. He thought a lot of Andrew Rappelier at tight end, who missed most of last season with an injury. And James Franklin went on the record and said, quote, "You probably wouldn't have seen Luke Reynolds last year had Rapp not gotten hurt." He believes Dinkins is the most complete tight end in the country. Obviously, there's the bias there. And then he believes the tight ends can line up at fullback, traditional tight end, off the hip of the quarterback, as a slot receiver. And you have this variety here, this depth at tight end, which is great. But what have you seen out of Andrew Rappelier? And is that kind of wild to think about? Like Luke Reynolds is a big reason why Penn State pulled it out against Minnesota last year. So to think that, not to change history or anything like that, but last year could have been different in that respect. What have you seen from Rappelier, and what did you make of the tight ends in week one? Because they were a little quiet.
I mean, they were quiet. I think that's good, as long as there's not any blocking debacles or anything of that nature. I think the increase of production from the outside receivers gives me ease on anything from the tight ends, just because it's as needed basis, and that's where they should be most of the time. So I think they could be secret weapons as we continue to move forward. And remember, we haven't seen the most or best out of the running backs in the run game yet. So I think those two things go hand in hand versus, the receivers getting into it and working on those second levels from a Drew standpoint or their passing attack.
James Franklin talked about hoping on the defensive side of the ball to continue to see stuff from Chaz Coleman, Kamaju, Mason Robinson, somebody that is a more veteran guy. So trying to get him healthy back in the rotation. We'll see if he is somebody who is involved this weekend. Really like what he saw to Type Landing, White, Gilliam, Wafel, Jalen Harvey, Malachi Williams. Like you did see a lot of pieces at defensive line. One guy that I wouldn't say he called him out, but basically said, quote, "I just want Keon Wiley at linebacker to let it rip." He said, quote, "He missed a lot of last year due to injury. He's trying to be right instead of just playing. We're going to have that moment when it all clicks, and we need that from him." Can you articulate that? And what have you seen out of Wiley?
I mean, that's the conversation we just previously had about Grunkemeyer, like how he plays in practice versus playing in the game. Well, in practice, you have to be right. Like it doesn't really matter if you make the play. Like the coach rather you not make. Well, he wants you to make the play, but he wants you to be right and make the play. In the game, people don't realize, like, coaches don't care if you do it right. They just want you to make the play in the game.
Right.
So, like, you have to be able to get out of that mode of like, hey, I'm trying to earn my trust as a new player that has been hurt the year before. I understand what that's like. Coming into a team, it's like, all right, I need Coach Knowles from Ohio State to trust me. So I got to be right about everything. I'm the captain of this defense. He's going to be talking to me. I got to be right. And then carrying that into the game slows you down because it's an instinctual position where you have to read, react, and move fast. And that's where a defensive coordinator wants to be able to trust that that you're a cerebral player and practice and know what you need to do, but you know how to pull that ripcord and really take the governor off and run through people and play at a speed and not be afraid of making mistakes, because when you play at 100% violence and speed, the mistakes get covered up.
Last thing I want to mention, special teams, sharp outing against Nevada. I mean, you had King Mack return that. Was it a punt or a kickoff? I can't remember.
Kickoff.
King Mack did a great job. You had a lot of different guys that you get back there. I want to continue to see the variety of people you can get involved back there. I can't recall if Devontae Ross was back there to field anything, but if he's somebody they want to take an extended look at, maybe you see a little bit more of Devontae Ross in this game. I'm very curious to see what he can do. Wide receiver, I'd love to see more of Kobe Howard. I'd love to see more of Tysier Denmark. I think there was intent to make a statement that the wide receivers look good in that first game and more of a focus there. So do you see some of that focus in the passing game intentionally go to the tight ends? The running back certainly got involved. I'm curious about that. Elsewhere on special teams, James Franklin illuminated that Gabe Nwosu is the starting punter right now. Penn State didn't punt versus Nevada, so that's why it came up. It said Gabe is special. He's the closest thing we've had to Jordan Stout, which is an incredible compliment. Franklin said Nwosu had a phenomenal camp in kickoff, punting, and also kicking field goals. Said there was an instance in camp where he could have hit, I think it was a 62-yarder or something over the over 60 yards. So like we knew he had an enormous leg and was always good as a kickoff specialist because you just blast the thing into the upper deck essentially. So he was good about that. But to hear the comparison to Jordan Stout, we don't talk special teams a ton on this, but man, that's quite the compliment.
No, it sure is. I mean, he was a weapon. Anytime that you have a specialist that can be a weapon, a lot of value.
Mm-hmm. So as we roll into the weekend, according to our friends at FanDuel, Penn State has the second best odds to win the Big Ten championship game, second only to Ohio State. The Buckeyes plus 190, Penn State plus 210. So from what you saw in that game against Texas, very early thought here, but how do you compare what you saw from Ohio State and what you saw from Penn State?
I mean, pretty evenly matched teams, to be honest with you. Got to come down to controlling the line of scrimmage. You got some pretty high-level coaching on both sides of football. I think the talent is somewhat, splitting hairs at that point, but it's going to come down to the schematics and who's ready to punch you in the mouth.
Mm-hmm. Also, for what it's worth, Oregon and Dante Moore look like they will be formidable to the surprise of absolutely no one. But September 27th, Penn State hosts Oregon. November 1st, Penn State goes to visit the Ohio State Buckeyes. So a lot upcoming on this schedule for Penn State football. We are going to have it all right here on State of State. Hop in our comment section. Tell us what you're excited about. What are you concerned about coming out of the Nevada game, potentially going to the FIU game? Things you'd like to see, differences, things staying the same, all that sort of stuff. Please let us know in our comments section. Remember, this Saturday at noon Eastern on the Big Ten Network, Penn State hosts FIU in week 2 of the 2025 season. We'll have a full recap right here on State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.